than Abraham.
All right, this here should be Shemesh having Aliyah, and this should be, and all the learning today should be in Iskun. Okay. So we're continuing where we left off yesterday on Eruvin of Gimel Mad Aleph. We were discussing how to fix an Eruv for the Mavoi. So basically, the problem is that if you want to carry in an area, it has to be properly enclosed. We're talking about a case of a Mavoi. A Mavoi is an alleyway. It is also considered to be a Carmelit, which means that it's a in between being Rishut Rabin and Rishut Yachid. And Midrabanan, you're not allowed to carry there until you fix it to make it more closed off. So that way, people will not accidentally carry. By carrying the Mavoi, they'll be confused, thinking just like I can carry in the Mavoi in the alleyway, can carry in the Rishut Rabin that it leads into as well. So we want people to not do that. So right now, we were discussing how can we fix it. So yesterday we were discussing what is the height at which you would be putting the Korah or the which would be the beam put across the top of the entryway to the alleyway. That way people would see it and recognize that here's where the alleyway ends and there's Rishut Rabin on the other side. So you can only carry until here, only in this region. Are you allowed to carry? You can't carry past it. So that's where we're up to yesterday. And now we're going to be going to more details about what if something. We're going to be talking a little bit more about how the Mavoi works and some more technical details about, again, comparing between Eruv and Sukkah and how they have a lot of similar halachot, one and the other. Okay? So again, we're on Gimel Amud Aleph by the two dots, about it's 4 lines down in the wide lines. So the Gemara says, Mixat Korah Metoch Estrim, Mixat Korah Lamal Estrim, Mixat Skach Metoch Estrim, Mixat Skach Lamal Estrim. So the question is, what happens if we placed our skach right in the middle? So the skach, it's not above 20, it's not below, it's actually it's going over and below. As you see here in the picture on the right, picture number 12. So there you can see quite clearly you see where it says Esrim Amma, and then you see where that's right in the middle of where the skach is. So the question is, what's the story? And then is it kasher? Is it pasul? Do you need to make it bigger? Make it smaller? What do we say? So Amar Rabba, Mavoi kasher. That if we're talking about a Mavoi and alleyway, that's fine if the beam goes below and above. But Sukkah pasul, but for Sukkah, it's no good. Ma'ishnav Mavoi kasher. So why is Mavoi different? It's because it's Darmin Kalosh. We say that it is Kalosh. So the question is, what is Kalosh? So Rashi, Kalosh is Rowan Ki'ilu Nital Oto Ha'ovi Hayotze Lamala V'Tehei Koradaka. Basically, take out everything that's left on top, and you see how it would be if it was razor thin. So so that works very well for Mavoi because there's no requirement for it to be any degree of thickness. But for skach, it has to be sufficient to be more than just razor thin. So Sukkanami Lema Kalosh. So then why can we say the same thing by the skach? So Kaloshat Havya La Chamata Meruba Mitzilata. Problem is if you take a very thin slice of skach, it won't fully cover the shade, and then it'll have a pasul sukkah. Because the requirement for a sukkah isn't that there's something there; it's that there's something there that also serves to create a majority of the area being covered in shade. Well, then we could say similarly. It could be a similar problem here that if we have a korah that's really thin, we could say that this korah is too flimsy. And if it's too flimsy, then it's not a valid beam to remind us, because it's going to blow away. Rather, what do we say? That even though it is very thin, we say that as if it's made out of metal. And metal is very strong. Even a very small amount of metal won't blow away in the wind, and it'll stay there. Couldn't you say the same thing here, that you simply had a very thin, let's say if you have a very thin schach, it could be that, let's say, like nowadays they sell really thin bamboo mats, which are maybe not even, they're maybe a couple of millimeters thick, and that's still and that's enough to give you enough of a covering. So maybe you should say the same thing by being a very thin and strong thing, but you can say the same thing by sukkah. So Amarabba, Parzik, so what does Rabba say? He's from Parziki, and he says, Sukkah Diliyachid he lo mitkar, Mavil Rabba mitkar adade. Difference is that that by a sukkah, people it's only one person typically using the sukkah. So since there's only one person using it, it's very easy for them to forget about it. But if you're talking about the case with the mavoy, everybody's using the same mavoy, and they'll remind each other, and then everyone's reminding each other that, remember, you can't carry past this point. So then therefore that'll work. And so how do we know that this is really true? People actually remind each other. As they had an idiom back then that pop along into partners is neither hot nor cold. Meaning that once you have right. So go back. So why is it right? So it's actually it's a little bit more of the reverse, because basically when you have, as it sometimes happens, when you have a group project or many people involved in something and nobody's told that they're in charge, then oftentimes things slip in between, and therefore nobody will end up fixing it by the case of a mavoy. Whereas by sukkah, you'll remember, and therefore you'll come to end up fixing it. So that would be the the modern day terms. That'd be basically the bystander effect that can cause it to be considered to be no good. Okay. Ravina Amar Sukkah Doraita Achmir Barabanan Mavud Rabbanan Lo Achmir Barabanan. So on the other hand, Ravina has a different answer, not based on people's ability to remember and know to correct it and move to the right height. Rather, it's based on, as we mentioned last up, there was a difference between why one is kosher, one pasul. It's because sukkah is daraita, so therefore the Rabban didn't think that it needed any chizuk. It didn't need people to take it more seriously. On the other hand, by Mavod is Rabbanan, Chazal had to be taken more seriously, because people often tend to ignore Durabanan. Oh, it's only Durabanan. So because of that, Chacham were more machmir by a Durabanan than they would be by Deraita. So my Havala, how is this possible? Basically because we seem to have Rabbah say on two sides of the argument, right? So we had, so how's that possible? So Rabbah Bar Rav Ula Amar Zev Azeh Pasul. Actually, both of them, if they're on the border, half above and half below, that's like if it's a wide beam or wide schach, it's possible. On the other hand, we got Rabbah Amar Zev Zeh Kasher. Rabbah would say no, they're both kasher as long as part of it's in the allowed range. Okay, now turning on to the next page. Chalal Sukkatanan, Chalal Mavoitan. Because when the Mishnah is talking about the empty space in between, it says 20 amot, referring to the empty space. So therefore, it's kasher as long as the empty space is less than 20 amot. We're not talking about the total size of the sukkah, the total size of the mavoi. We're talking about the empty area. That's what we're talking about. Which would work well if you were going also with what we mentioned yesterday about the mother being learned out from the ulam or from the or from the hechal, because for them they had an amot on top, which added even more height to it. So if we were talking about the whole height, they would have had different measurements as opposed to the numbers that we currently have. Okay, so Amar Le Papa Laraba, Tanya Messilacha. Right, I have a BAYT that'll actually support you when you're saying that it's only referring to the gap, not to the whole thing. If you have a bovoi that is 20 amot taller than the hechal, you should make it less. The hechal gufo v'chalolo as mesri, and the hechal itself, including its the empty space, is is 20. So that's how we know. So therefore, we see that they're referring to the gap and not referring to the gap in the entry and not referring to the whole structure itself. So Itve Rav Shimi Barav Ashil Rav Papa. So then Rav Shimi, then Rav Shimi Barav is Baravashi is asking Rav Papa. Ketzad Hayosa. So the question is, so then what should you do? Maniach Kora Misvat Astrim Ulamata. Then shouldn't we say that the whole beam should be placed, the top of it should then be placed below 20 if we're not going to accept the halal approach? So Ema Ulamala Halamatak Tani. Then it should have said 20 and up. Why does it say? But the Mishnah says Lamata, we should place it below. So wait. So what does this have to mean? Hakmashmalan. So what do we mean to say? Lamata lamala. Below, like below, so above. Malamala kalala asrim. Aflamata kalas asara. So just like above, we say that the empty space is 20 amot. Similarly, below that, it's the gap can be 10. Right, but here that 10 is not referring to amot, referring to tvachim. If you put a korah too low to the ground, it also is possible. Amar Abaye Mishmei Rav Nachman, and Abaye says the name of Rav Nachman, Amat Sukav, Amat Mavoy, but Amat Chamisha. So now we're getting back to the more technical things. Right, so that's important to keep in mind. A lot of things in Eruvin. Let's say nowadays we're to explain somebody, what the daily upkeep is of the local area. But you get down to a lot of nitty-gritty details. So here we're going to be explaining now that we are talking about we have to establish the height of the mavoy. We're trying to figure out. Wait, when we say 20 amot, what exactly is an amot? So Amar by Mishmei Rav Nachman, Amat Sukkah, Amat Mavoy, but Amat Bat Chamisha. So when we're measuring amot for Sukkah and for a mavoy, that's the amot that's made up of 5 tefachim. Right, so that's a smaller amma, but amat kilayim, but amma bashisha. But on the other hand, when we're measuring out the distances for kilayim of plants that are planted that are crossbred and planted in the same area, which is an isser d'oraita of kilayim. So for that we measure it based on the larger amma, the amma that's made up of 6 tefachim. So Amat Mavoy, but Amat Bachamisha Mai Hilchata. So when we say that Amat Mavoy is measured for 5 tefachim per amma, for what halacha does that apply? So that's relevant. We're talking about the maximum height of the core of the mavoy, and also l'pirtzat mavoy, and for when there's a breach in the alleyway being more than 10 amot wide, as we mentioned in the Mishnah. V'ha'ika meshach mavoy ba'arba amot l'kula. But what about the fact? But isn't there another issue to worry? So right now we've been looking at the slice of just the entryway of it being, about how wide it is and how tall it is. But isn't there something else we have to take into your mind, which is the depth of the mavoy? V'ha'ika meshach mavoy ba'arba amot l'kula. But isn't there a minimum length that it has to be in order for it to be considered to be a reshut at all? Because if it's too small, then it's not even a mavoy. Command Amar Bar Tachim, right? So shouldn't they have, mentioned that? So it's like, so for the minimum size, right? So the Gemara is asking, based on the fact that the minimum size, they think that the minimum size for reshut is 4 by 4. But 4 by 4 amot. So no, we're saying what is this? So what is whose min is it? Command Amar Bar Tachim. Rather, what is the minimum depth that you can have for something to be considered reshut? It's not 4 amot. Rather, it's 4 tefachim, and therefore the way you measure your amma doesn't make a difference at the end of the day for that. So or maybe you could say that really the depth still is 4 amot, but when they said Arba amot, they weren't being super precise. They meant that it's more of an approximate. But most amot, because most amot are 5, and we'll be makel and say 5 is opposed to 6. Okay, so now we're good. Now we're continuing on with the parallel in sukkah. So amat sukkah, amat bat chamishal ba'yachada. So when we say that the amma for sukkah is the 5 tacham amma as opposed to 6 tacham amma, so for which ones does this apply? Legovha, lodofen, akuma. Right. So where do we use this for measurements? We use this for measuring out. It's the maximum height of the sukkah as well as dofen akuma. So. Okay, so gova is what we were talking about until now, and dofakuma is basically that if you have, let's say, if you have either a literal crooked wall, and let's say the wall is, is slanting over one side, or the more common case would be, if you're trying to put your sukkah up next to your house, a lot of the times so there's often an overhang of the roof, so we consider that to be dofakuma. We view it as if the whole wall is bent, and for the wall being bent, there's a limit on the length that you're allowed to have it be bent, which is 4 amma. For more on that, we'll hopefully get there when we get to Masem Sukkah. But that's what that's referring to. But didn't we say that there's some parts where we have arba amot in sukkah that's lakula? The Tanya Rabbi Omer. Omer Ani kol sukkah she'ein ba arba amot arba amot zula. So when Rebbe gives what's the minimum size of a sukkah, he says it's 4 amot by 4 amot, and we said that we only listed 2 measurements. We mentioned the height. We mentioned the height. We also mentioned the crooked walls. We made no mention of the whole of the area of the floor space of the sukkah, which is what Rebbe mentioned. So rather, what do we say? Karabanan de Amri afilu ena b'chazeket ela rosho berubo v'shulchana. Rather, it's according to the Rabbanan who say that no, it's not 4 by 4. Rather, it's the amount that'll fit your head and majority of your body and your table, which ends up working out to be much smaller, roughly 7 tvachim. Alternatively, Olam Rebbe or similar to the way we answered before, that rather could still work with Rebbe's opinion, but when he was referring to amot, so the amot for the floor space is majority of the amot, which would mean that 5 or 6, all right, so that would mean that you could do it with either 5 or 6, and so therefore we're talking about the sukkah is 5. When we're saying 5, so most of the time it's 5. But as in meaning we use 5 for the height and for the fakuma, but for the width we'd use 6. So amat kilayim ba'ama bat shishal b'yachata. So we said that kilayim, for the forbidden mixtures of planting of seeds, it's an amma that's made up of 6 tvachim. So what is that? For which halacha is that relevant? For the literally the bald vineyard, and for the emptiness of the karen. But the idiom actually means, when it says karachat, it means a place that is clear in the vineyard as opposed to a place that's planted. So it looks bald, but it really just means it's a clearing. And limchol hakarem is referring to the perimeter, like to go around something. How we have before, we're saying a halal was the empty space enclosed. Here it's the whole area that is enclosed, the limchol. Okay. Now I learned in the Mishnah, karachat hakarem. Right, so now this is Mishnah Kilayim. So karachat hakarem b'shamei omrim esrim v'arba amot. So what is the area of the clearing that you'd have in your vineyard? So Bishama says it's 24 amot. V'hil omrim sheisar amot. It's 16 amot. Mukol hakarem b'shamei omrim sheisar amot. V'hil omrim 12 amot. And as far as the perimeter of the vineyard, like you'd have to have there. So Beit Shammai says that it would have to be 16, and Ben Hillel says it should be 12. So now we're gonna go back and do a little bit more in terms of the explanation of terms, because we seem to have done a little bit of of skipping for what exactly that means. Okay, so ezohi karachad kerem. What do we mean by the clearing in the kerem? How does that work? So kerem shacharav emtzaito. So you had a vineyard, and then the center of it was destroyed. Ein sham sheshesrei amot lo yavi zer l'sham. If the area within is not 16 amot, but 16 amot, you can't plant that area. But haya sham sheshesrei amot noten lo k'dei avodato v'rei otomotar. But if it is 16 by 16, then you can leave off the resident gap on the edges, 4 amot on the sides, in order to demarcate between the area that's for the vineyard versus the area that's for the seeds, and then you could plant inside. One moment, let me just share with everybody a diagram. Just hopefully this will we get all of the diagrams I'm showing are from Parish Chai, conveniently found on Hebrew books, and also if people are using Koren or ArtScroll, there should be diagrams accompanying there as well. So the photo number 15 is what we refer to as the karacha, where you have the bet being the subsequent area that's 8 by 8, where you can plant your seeds, and the area you see there's a little olive and there's little animal cart over there. So that area there that's meant to be left empty to differentiate between the vineyard and where you're planting seeds. So now continuing back in the Gemara. So now we know what a karachat kerem is. So, but the ezu machol kerem. So what do we mean by when we say the perimeter of the vineyard? What does that mean? It's ben kerem lagader. It's the distance that should be kept between your vineyard and the fence and your property line. Ein sham 12 amot lo yavi zer l'sham. If there aren't 12 amot on the edge of your field, then you can't plant there. Hayu sham 12 amot noten lo k'dei avodato v'zerei et hashar. But if you're up against the fence, right? So again, we're looking at in the diagram. Now we're do we have it? Is there? Here we go. It's photo number 17, machol kerem. So there, you need to have a sufficient gap between the vineyard and where you're gonna be planting the seeds, and then there you're gonna need to have another gap between the seeds and the wall. Okay, so we'd have 4 and 4 and 4 for the total of 12 that we need. As was before, we needed to have it be 4, 8, and 4. Okay, back into the Gemara. V'ha'ika retzufim ba'arba amot. What about doesn't there halacha that talks about if you had planted the vines one next to the other one within 4 amot to lakula? We normally would say that if we're measuring the distance between different species, we would say we go lakula. Nan kerem anatu alpacha me'arba amot. Rabbi Shimon Omer enokem. Amrim kerem v'roen et emtzaim kilo einam. So we have a parallel case where we're talking about dimensions of 4 amot, where Rabbi Shimon says that if you have too small of a kerem, it's only 4 amot wide. That's not a kerem. That's simply, you have an isolated fruit tree in your backyard. That's not a problem. Kerem v'roen et emtzaim kilo einam. What the Chachamim say, no, that's considered to be enough to be considered to be a kerem, and you simply view the spaces as if they're empty. So therefore, if you had planted in between 2 rows of trees, that would be a problem, because even if it necessarily hasn't reached the level of kilai eha kerem in and of itself, but in terms of if you wanted to plant in that region, you still can't, because we view the whole area as being 4, ignoring the width that was taken up by the trees themselves. Karabanan. So rather, what must you say? That this is all according to the Rabbanan to Amri Habe Kerem. That's according to the opinion of the Rabbanan, who says that if it's 4 amot would constitute its own region of a vineyard and in order to be chayav yun kilayim a kerem. Or you could say, even according to Lolam Rabbi Shimon, even Rabbi Shimon's opinion, and what do we say? Barov amot kamar. He was referring to the fact that for most things we use the amma of 6, even though for some things we may use an amma of 5. So basically, it's the reverse version of Rov amma that we've been using until now. There was most of the time you use 5, and in one case you use 6. Now it's most of the time you use 6, but in this one case you use 5. Okay, so now we have a different opinion. That Rava Mishmei de Rav Nachman Amar Kol Amma Ba'ama Bat Shisha. So Rava says the name of Rav Nachman that every amma that is mentioned is really 6. Ella halalu shachakot, halalu atzevot. So when we're mentioning measurements, we're always going to be using the amma made up of 6 tefachim. Rather, what's the difference? Halalu shachakot, halalu atzevot. Right. So the question is, are they? There's 2 ways that you can make a fist. You can make a fist either through. Let's see. Here we go. So you see, everybody sees here number in figure number 18. So there's a question of when you make a fist. There's a tightly clenched fist, and then there's a loosened fist. So if you're measuring based on a tightly clenched fist, so you'll have a smaller tefach. And if you're talking simply about, you put your hand down loosely, then it'll be a little bit bigger, and that's how you'll end up with a difference in size. So that's how we could say the difference. So yes, they're all using the same. All amot are really made up of 6 tefach. And the question is, how big are the tefachim you're using? So this whole thing again. So as far as the reason why I haven't really been given any modern day approximations for how large an amma or a tefach is, because it's actually subject to a much larger debate between Rav Chaim and the Chazon Ish, as well as a lot of other achronim as well. There's the question of how do you measure a tefach? Is it based on which fingers of your hand? Is based on the whole fist? So for now, we're going to operate off of what the Gemara says as far as what it ends up being left for Lamasa. If we have time at the end of the year today, hopefully I'll address it shortly. But if not, we'll simply know that there is that there is a machloket about that, and we'll hopefully get to it another time.
But would the nafkamina would be the same? Because we're talking about different sizes. One is smaller, one is bigger. So whether it's clenched, if it's clenched, it's smaller. If it's not as clenched, it's bigger. So in the end, it's the same thing that we were saying before.
Correct. So what Rava is saying, and then Rav Nachman is that that actually is the same. We're calling it the same amma, even though it's not really the same. As in based on the way you measure it, a clenched hand versus a loosened hand will get you the different size that we're going for. So you're right, they are different measurements. Just as far as the way we still call it, all of them will be called an amma made up of 6 tefachim. Just a different type of tefachim. So, yeah. Okay. So now continuing on. So. Metvei kol amot she'amru chachamim ba'ama bat shisha v'vash lo yeh mechuvanot. So when we say that every amma is made up of 6 tefachim, that means to say that it's not mechuvan means precisely, right? So they're not precise, they're not exactly a cubit. Bishlam Rava hegel havyan halal shachakot halal atzevot. So this makes sense according to Rava, because he said there's a difference between whether your fist tightly clenched versus loosely held, and now give us a difference. Or otherwise, Abaye say it says 1's 5 and 1's 6. What do you mean by mechuvanot? Abaye ema amat kilayim ba'ama bat shisha. Rather, so Abaye would say that when we say amma for kilayim, we're always referring to an amma of 6, but for the other ones, it's an amma of 5. And so when they said that, when they said that we always use an amma of 6, that was only meant for kilayim, not for anything else. But what about we have in the seifa of that Beit? Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer kol amot shem chachamim b'kilayim ba'ama bat shisha v'vad shlo yehu b'tzimtzamot miklal l'tanakama kol amot kama. So the problem is that we have the end part of the Beit we quoted earlier, which says that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel used to say that whenever Chachamim said an amma, they meant for kilayim, they meant an amma of 6 tefachim, as long as it's not, as long as you're not measuring out exactly 6. So so that which sounds to be like more like Rav's opinion. But that would mean that our opinion that we were talking about earlier, the one we're trying to say, shofakot versus so the tightly clenched fist versus the loose fist. So that means that the Tanakama is referring to not simply the case of kilayim, but if or Rav Gamliel is saying only for kilayim, then you can't Abai is saying that the Amaz of 6 is only for kilayim can't work, because if the Tanakama meant that, then he would have said that. So clearly the Tanakama thinks that when the Chacham said kol amot that are 6, that he meant really all of them are 6, unlike Rav Shimon Gamliel. So Amar L'cha Abaye, so what does Abaye say? V'la mikar Rav Shimon Gamliel dekai kvate ana damrik Shimon Gamliel. So Abaye has the very easy answer of, whoever told you that I held like Chachamim, rather I hold like Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and since Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel exists, that's my opinion, and now my opinion works very well. So Labai Valei Tanai. According to Bai, that means that the machloket of whether an amma is measured by 5 or 6 is machloket Tanai. L'Rava milema Tanai. But then do we have to say that the machloket whether an amma is 5 tachim or 6 tachim is machloket Tanai? Do we have to say that also for Rava as well? So Amar Rava, Rishon Gamliel ha'ato hashvinan amat kilayim lo yitzamtem. So Rava says Rishon Gamliel meant to say that amat kilayim shouldn't be measured with a clenched fist. That's what he meant to say. V'lema amat kilayim lo yitzamtem. Then why didn't it? Then why, if that's really what Rishon Gamliel's opinion meant, according to the way Rav is interpreting it, then shouldn't the language of the Beit to have been an amma for kilayim you shouldn't make smaller. But then why would we be talking about it? Then what does it mean when Rav Shimon says an amat shisha? What does he mean then? Lav ute amat sukkah amat mavoi. So wouldn't that mean that we only use the amma of 6 for kilayim, but not for sukkah and mavoi, as we'd mentioned earlier in the daf today? Lo limute amma yesod v'amma sovev. Rather, no. Which ones aren't included? And the amma at the base of the mizbeach, and the amma we use for measuring the ledge that's halfway up on the mizbeach. Okay, let's see. Okay, so everybody sees the diagram number 20. So seeing diagram number 20, right? So there is the mizbeach. This is a side view of the mizbeach hanachoshet. Which we also mentioned in terms of we used for determining the height yesterday. So there is the yesod, which is aleph, which the bottommost layer, which is 5 tachim. Then we have the width of that's different from the yesod, and the next stage is 6 tachim wide. And then we have the next segment of it, 6 tachim. Then we have the soveh, which is the place that the way that the Kohana would, when they were walking around the Beit Hanachoshet on that small perimeter. So that was 5 tachim wide. And then we have three amot to the top. And then we have on the top we have 5 tachim tall the corners to the crowns of the mizbeach. So in terms of the total amot, so we've got aleph is 1 amma, gimel is 5 amma, hey is 3 amma, and vav is 1 amma. But aleph and vav are amot of 5 tfachim, whereas gimel and hey, each of those amot are made up of 6 tfachim. Okay. And so how do we know this? So we'll learn this out based on tichtiv ve'ela midot hamizbeach ba'amot amma v'tovach v'chek amma v'amma v'rochav u'gula al shatav saviv zeret echad v'zer gav hamizbeach. So this is a pasuk from Yechazkel where it says these are the measurements of the Mizbeach, done in Amot. It's an Amma, and then an Amma and a base. This is Amot. This is measurements done in Amot, and those done in hand breadths. So and the breadth of the, and it also talks about the breadth of the cubit, and the border by the edge should be around a span, i.e. a tefach as well, and this will be a higher part of the altar. So again, this is how exactly that translates to the picture we had before, a little complicated, but the Gemara is going to explain now. What is which phrase of, because when you read that phrase, you don't immediately think, it doesn't necessarily translate to the picture we have, with the picture I'll share the picture again. Just so everybody can can be reminded what the Mizbeach look like. Right, so then from the words that we have in Yechazkel, it's not readily apparent whatsoever that it's referring to structure that looks like that. So now the Gemara goes on and explains what each part means. Chek ha'ama zeh yesod. When it says chek ha'ama as measurement, that's referring to the yesod, the bottommost level. Ha'ama rochav zeh sovev. And when it says an amma wide, that's referring to the sovev, the area that on the middle section where the kohanim would be able to walk around. Uvula al svata saviv, and when it says by the border, by the lip which goes around it, that's referring to the crowns on top, to the that would jut out on the four corners. And when it says this is the highest part of the mizbeach, so that's for zemizbeach as a hub. So even though until now we've been describing the other mizbeach, now we're referring to the mizbeach, that's the mizbeach as a hub. Okay, back. Okay, so I'm stopping the share and back in the Gemara. Amar Rabbi Chia bar Ashi Amarav Shirin Chatzitzin Mechitzin. That all the that all of the measurements that we use for chatzitzas, for gaps, and for mechitzas, for making walls. Chatzitza is something that blocks between one place. Chatzitza is something that's on your body that makes it no good for going to tefillah, and mechitza, which is things that are differentiate between different areas. Everything there is a halacha Moshe Sinai, right? So why do they all work? The answer is really it's because Moshe heard it at Har Sinai, and that's why it is what it is. Not necessarily for any limit in particular, so because that's what God said and Moshe conveyed to us. Shiurin, Doraitahu. What do you mean Shiurin? What do you mean that it's all halacha Moshe Sinai? Doraitahu, we learned it out from Pasuk. As we learned in this passage, Eretz V'Tau Seorah Yementina V'Rimon, which is a mnemonic that translates each and every one of the halachot of measurements. V'Amar Rav Nachman, Kol Pasuk Hazel Shiurim Nemar, and Rav Chanan says every single word of this pasuk is to teach us about the various different shiurim, the very different measurements. So now we're going to break down how exactly does that pasuk, which is turned into the song of Eretz Chita Sarah, right? So that song that everybody knows, or Eretz about Chalav Vash, right? So depending on which version of the song it is, but either way, that pasuk. Question is, how does that help us with shiurim? Like, it doesn't sound immediately that way. It just sounds like it's listing the shiva to meaning. How does that do the measurements? So we're getting there. So now the Gemara explains. Chita lichititnan. The chita is relevant as it pertains to the following Mishnah. Hanichnas l'bayit hamnuga v'chilav al ktefav v'zandlav tabotav bi'adav hu v'hem tmeim miyad. If somebody were to have walked into a house that has sarat, that is covered in sarat, and he's carrying his kalim, wearing his sandals and rings on his feet, and his rings on his hands, on his fingers, then he and everything that he's wearing is considered to be tamei immediately. Hayalavush kelav. If he was wearing his things, you're not carrying them, but actually properly wearing them, he's supposed to. That lavush kelav is wearing his clothing. Sandalav berglav, his shoes were on his feet. Totav be'etzbotav hayat tamei miyad. So, but if the items had been even wearing the way they're supposed to be worn, it's supposed to be carrying them over his shoulder, right? He's immediately tamei. And there, only tamei once you've been there for how long? A amount of time it takes you to eat half a loaf of bread. Pat titin v'lo pat sarin meisa avocha belifta. So how much is that time? It's referring to the amount of time it takes you to eat wheat bread, because wheat bread is easier to eat than barley bread, which is normally rougher. And also, whether you're eating, we're not simply saying, the world fastest, person in terms of food eating contest, referring to the average person who sits down, relaxes, and eats it while dipping it in relish. Not super fast, not super slow, but simply a person who's eating it at a moderate pace. Then why does the pasuk say Sorah? We learn from Sorah. Sorah Keditnan. So that's for another mission. The answer goes Sorah. Matami b'magov masa. The end of matami b'oel. That if a portion of a bone is found and it's the size of a barley, it is matame by touching it or by carrying it, but it is not yet large enough to be matame via tumat oel, meaning that anything that's underneath the same roof would then be tame as well. So, and then when we learn from Geffen Gedei Revi'i Yain L'Nasir. So from Geffen we learn out that there's a quantity of a Revi'ita log, a quarter of a log, which is around 30 milliliters. You got exact measurements. You get look at how much that is, and that's for the yain, the wine for a Nazir. Tena, Tena is relevant because if you have the measurement is a gregar, which is basically a dried fig cake. That's if you carry that size out on Shabbos, you're over an Isser and Rimon. As we mentioned, that how big are the in another Mishnah? What size does the kli need does the utensil need to be in order for it to be able to become tameh? It has to be the size of a pomegranate. Sorry, if the holes are the size of if the holes are inside the pomegranate, the person that's able to use it wants to bigger than a pomegranate. You can't store anything in it if the holes are that big, and therefore the kli is now plus a kli. And finishing out the pasuk, eretz. So we've got two more phrases. Yes, left. So eretz shem rivash. So what's eretz? Eretz shekol shirek is a means the land of all of what you measure everything that grows in terms of the size of an olive. Kol shiras, to really mean all of them. Didn't we just have a whole bunch of other measurements? Ha'ikahani damran. We just mentioned it a whole bunch. Elaima, eretz shiro shirek is 18. Rather, it's land where most things are measured in terms of kazayit, which is in about an olive's worth, which is why normally when you're talking about how much you have to eat for bracha, we always say kazayit and other ilachot as well. And Dvash, Kedova, Agat, selling Kippurim. So saying that when we're measuring out the volume of something for violating the Easter rites of Yom Kippur, it's a large date. It's the size of a large date, which is bigger than a kazayit. But Chispara Shirin Miftav Tive. So wait, so if you really hold that pasuk really teaches us all the dinner that we just mentioned. No, you're right. Really, they're all halacha Moshe Sinai that we've mentioned prior. Rather midrabanan, we gave an asmat. We gave a support to help you remember all of the Rabbanan gave us support to help you remember basically a mnemonic device to remind you all of the about all of the measurements. Okay. Anybody have any questions? Because I think we'll probably end up stopping here and continue here tomorrow. Before we get to the next about the whole of chatzitza, because that's a little more complex. Anybody have any questions?
Sure. So the whole idea of the measurements with the smaller rama and the bigger rama and then the clenched fist and the wider fist, is there any nafkamina? Is there as a difference in size, or is it just semantics of how you want to phrase it? Because there is a difference.
Right. So there is a difference in size. Basically, the way we paskin, we end up picking one or the other. So in the Gemara, there's a difference, but also Masa, we don't differentiate.
Okay.
I mean, there's
And-
even a difference between people's hands, right? I mean, there's no standard size. A huge hand could be very different whether it's spread apart compared to a small person's hand.
So we're going to get there soon. That there's a difference between D'oraita versus D'Rabbanan. For D'oraita, it's done in the measurements of the individual person. Say for Yom Kippur, you'd have to measure, if you're doing shiurim, you have to measure out based on your own volume of the amount of, let's say for fluids, how much your own mouth can hold if you're doing shiurim. Whereas for Din D'Rabbanan, we tend to we use a unified measurement of the what's luckily determined to be the average.
Very nice. Thank you.
Good. And one question as far as the sukkah is concerned. When we were measuring, what did it mean when we were with the Maboy, the sukkah, and then with Kalayim, it said Lakula. What was it referring to with that then we would have to change the measurement?
So I'm not sure I'm understanding. Meaning it meant that
No,
when we're going Lakula, it would mean that we would use the smaller measurement when it would help us. That's means Lakula.
Right. But was that a problem to do?
I mean, depending on the dimension. I mean, the Lakula was saying that we're talking about the depth of the sukkah. So as opposed to for the height where we want it to be taller, for it to hit the minimum size of the sukkah, we want to use the smaller measurement, not the larger measurement, because we want to be able to make sure that our sukkah is kosher. Because we want to have the smallest sukkah possible, as opposed to when we're trying to put the mother as high as possible, or the top of the sukkah as high as possible. Where the more makel there would actually fall, we would be using the larger shear, not the smaller shear.
So that's when the whole interchange of the larger and smaller came into. Okay, perfect. Yes. Thank you. Okay, I'm good.
Okay, so we will pick up tomorrow with Hechel Katzitza.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good day.